thank you everybody for accommodating that last minute change of venue. I'm not sure who's in charge of the lights, but if we could get them dimmed just a little bit, then we don't have to get our sunglasses out to be up here. So thank you so much for accommodating that last minute change. Couldn't be happier that we have this turnout. I think there was 100 people out in the outside of the presentation that we just did that didn't hear the introduction. So let's just do a little 5-minute repeat so everybody's on the same page, okay? And I'll make it really quick. So first of all, I'm Lainey Jones. I'm the program manager for Mountain Accord, and I love Park City. I used to be a resident here, and I thought it was the greatest place on earth. So I want to introduce our panel members here. This is Peter Metcalf with the Outdoor Industry in Black Diamond. We've got Chris Robinson with Summit County Council, Andy Bierman with Park City Council, Kathy Kalo with the Forest Service, and Jeff Heilman, who's with the Mountain Accord team. So I'm going to talk for a couple of minutes about what we are doing here tonight and what we're proposing. And then we're going to open it up for questions. And the way this meeting is going to go is that there'll be microphones circulating up and down the aisle. So you can grab a mic and from our friends over here on the aisles, and you can ask a question or make a comment. I'm going to ask you to keep it to 60 seconds or less. And if I hold my phone up, then I'm trying to remind you that you're just about running short on time. And if you could direct your question to a panel member, then they'll give responses. They're going to give about 2-minute responses, and so we can keep it moving tonight and we can cover a lot of ground. We're going to spend about 15 minutes each on 4 topics. First, the environment, then recreation, then economy, and then transportation. So that way we make sure we cover a lot of ground. And I would ask that we want to make sure we hear from a variety of perspectives tonight. And so I would ask that we don't heckle or give applause to any particular comments. We want to make sure our friends and neighbors are not intimidated and feel free to share their opinions this evening. So just really briefly, our proposed blueprint, we went out to public with it about a couple of weeks ago, and it's out for public comment. We're hoping to get your comments on that by March 16th. The blueprint is composed of 4 components. We have environmental preservation, which is foundational to everything we're doing on Mountain Accord. And there are a couple things we're proposing for environmental preservation. One of those things is additional federal protections on Forest Service lands, such as a national recreation area or a national monument. Second component is land ownership adjustments. The ski resorts have offered about 2,000 acres of land that would go into public ownership in exchange for other things that we'll talk about tonight. So that's one of the components, is preservation. It's foundational to everything on Mountain Accord. Second component is a regional trail network that would connect the canyons and connect the Park City area and the population base in Salt Lake in and out of the mountains. Third component, foundational principle, let's keep development in our economic centers in the urbanizing areas in the Salt Lake Valley and in Park City and at the base of the ski resorts. And let's not have development in other areas in the mountains. Fourth component, let's connect these economic centers and the key recreation nodes in the mountains with high quality, year-round, marketable, fast, convenient transit. And that means in all of our mountains. If I had a map I would show you, but there's all the canyons are needing additional transit service so that we're not so car dependent in the future. It's something foundational that we've heard from everybody to date. Let's not have a future that's solely relying on cars. So that's kind of a general overview of the blueprint. This was developed over the past year and a half with just about every decision maker that you can think of that's involved in the Central Wasatch Mountains. We have over 20 people represented on the executive board, And they range from private entities to federal, state, and local entities that have all the decision-making authority and the vested interest in the future of the Central Wasatch Mountains. We've never seen this type of effort before. So a lot's gone into the blueprint. We're here tonight to talk about it. We haven't made any decisions yet, and over the next 2 years, we'll be embarking on a lot of public dialogue until we actually reach final decisions. So in April, the executive board is going to be adopting a general blueprint and saying, here's our next steps to move forward, but we've got a lot more public involvement, a lot more dialogue, and a lot more decisions to make. So with that, let's hear from you. Enough from me, okay?
Give him a mic. Can't hear him.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so the question was, the question is asking, do we want to spend more time on a certain topic? So what I've suggested is that we spend 15 minutes on environment, 15 minutes on recreation, 15 on economy, and 15 on transportation. So the question is that going to give us enough time? So do we have time at the end? Can we spend more time on transportation? Or what time, after the, yeah, okay. Okay, I think we can stay as long as we want in terms of answering all the transportation questions, okay? All right, so we're about to start on environment. Sorry. Yeah, we've been doing this, we've done this several times, and this is a really good flow, okay? And the reason we're starting with the environment is because it's what's foundational to our Mountain Accords efforts, okay? It's important to everybody in this room, and it's important that we talk about why are we all here, okay? This is a foundational reason for why we're here. We've proposed big things that are gonna affect you in the audience. So you should care about the environment, and let's start with a couple questions. Who's got something they want to ask?
On your blueprint here, you have the dark green area, which is proposed for increased environmental protection. And you briefly touched upon the National Forest part of that, but at least here on the eastern side of the Wasatch, there is a lot of private land ownership. And what's the proposal for this increased environmental protection of these so-called private lands, and can you impose some sort of increased environmental restrictions on private landowners?
Okay, Chris or Andy, you want to take this?
Is mic on? It is. I think that, as Lainey described, a lot of the actions in the Cottonwood Canyons are involved. I mean, most of the land preservation, because it's public land and it's changing categories and there's land exchanges and things. And there hasn't been as much focus on the Wasatch Back on land preservation. The Mountain Accord did form a private, what was our title? Private Lands Preservation Committee that would be looking at trying to create a formal mechanism for facilitating the preservation of key parcels. And we've deferred that a little bit to get past this first phase into the second phase of our process. This second phase being the NEPA analysis, National Environmental Policy Act analysis, that will take place after we make our decisions in April. So the short answer is there isn't a lot going on on the Wasatch Back on private land preservation.
Yeah, I would just add to that one of the tenets of that group was that we have a lot of entities in the Wasatch Mountains that are looking to preserve land, and we think we might be able to do it more effectively if we join forces. So for example, the Forest Service and Park City and Summit Land Conservancy and et cetera, could we leverage if we partnered? And that one of the tenets of the group is that it's willing sellers. And so there's no program to look at imposing on private property rights. The principle is that when you have a willing seller, we'd like to acquire private lands for preservation.
I just wanted to add to what's been said, and you're going to hear this a couple of times tonight. The Mountain Accord is a series of regional ideas and solutions and proposals, but it's not meant to be a catch-all. And the challenges on the Wasatch Front mostly have to do with public land, and the Mountain Accord is dealing with some of those land swaps. On the back, we deal mostly with private land, and we do have, both at the city and the county level, we have citizens boards that are well-funded from bonds. One comes from resort tax, which is the city's COSAC we call it, and then BOSAC, which is the county's version, just passed a $20 million bond, and we are focused on purchasing private land. So that is going forward, it's just not part of the Mountain Accord effort.
Another question?
I had the same concern regarding private property, and I'm not sure that I heard the last question answered. You were saying that mostly it's not going to relate to private property, but I'm wondering specifically, is there, other than the ski resorts and their related areas, does the blueprint envision in any way additional environmental protections or development restrictions on private property that's either located within the national forest or that abuts a national forest? And related to that, I'm wondering, in some of the elements, for example, the recreation element, it was ambiguous regarding that. And so I'm wondering, does the blueprint completely supersede the ideal systems, or are those incorporated as part of the blueprint?
So I think I understand the question that you're getting at. So when you do when you're looking at additional federal protections like a national monument or like wilderness, the idea from the recreation group was to kind of glue in place the broad range of recreational activities that we have today. And so the intent was not to place additional restrictions, but rather to preserve it like it is today. And typically those designations do not impact private land. Okay.
Does the blueprint supersede the ideal systems? Or are they part of the blueprint still?
There are many components of each of the idealized systems that are part of the blueprint, and those are referenced in the blueprint. But not every component of the idealized systems was proposed in the blueprint.
In the other room, you alluded to the Matheson plan, and that just raised the question in my mind too, how much of what you're talking about is going to rely on state versus federal buy-in to what we're doing, because the state and the fed are currently fighting about these types of designations.
That's right. Somebody want to take that?
I can take that. This process is involving the state as well as the federal, as well as local governments and communities. So the intent here is for a collaborative effort between all those entities to move forward with a recommendation based on the work that's been done so far, as well as the work that's still to be done with public input that we're working on right now.
On the federal side, as I understand it, it'd be a parallel course. The federal action, anything that affects federal land would be, or federal money would be a federal action. It would be going through the NEPA process. Congressional land, Congress would have to make designations as to wilderness, national recreation area, or national conservation area monument, and so forth, or that's presidential. But there would be a parallel congressional action. Once all the parties agree on what should happen, we would then try to get the Congress to bless it.
I would just add to that our congressional delegation is following Mountain Accord. They attend our meetings, all 6, and they're saying, hey, if you get this kind of support, we're supportive. So, okay. Which areas are we considering for additional federal protections?
The environmental group and the recreation group have identified areas that they think are either sensitive or provide valuable attributes for preservation, but the exact areas have not been, developed as far as which areas they're going to specifically put forward for designation. So that's still a work in progress. That both groups have identified areas that they would like to see, but what kind of designation and specifically which ones would be moved forward has not been decided yet.
In the other room, in the auditorium, we showed a map that had those light areas that were light green that were already protected, and then there was a darker polygon, different shade of green, and that's the tentative area being studied.
And for those that are familiar with the Matheson Wilderness Bill, most of the lands that were listed on that are ones we're looking at again.
Okay, right back here.
As you think about the corridors, the 4 points you're talking about growth, have you thought about the environmental impacts of channeling a quick way to get from the sprawl of Salt Lake County to now come across the mountain, which you're saying will channel growth just to those growth areas, but in fact, won't that just cause Heber to become a giant place and Camas to become a giant place? I mean, that's how development has happened in most places. Because we don't have, as you're saying, the ability to manage property, private property, we in fact, have you all thought about the implications of this to actually be a sprawl initiative? West side, come east.
Let's refrain from clapping and guffawing, if we could. Yeah. Andy, do you want to take that one, or?
Sure.
Okay.
I think we're all deeply concerned about the growth and what those growth patterns are going to be. And I think if you look at the root of the Mountain Accord, it's mostly preservation based. We're trying to figure out how we can manage that growth and how in the cases that it occurs, we can really consolidate it. This is all starting out under a premise that those areas are facing huge growth. They have big entitlements for development. I think Wasatch County is the fastest growing county in Utah and one of the fastest growing in the country. And there is no plan to deal with all those people and cars. And so in general, the Mountain Accord is trying to figure out how to get people out of cars. We figure if we're going to get the people, we'd rather have them out of their cars. That being said, we don't have a plan for Wasatch County. That's one for another day, and those discussions have begun. I think one of the positive things of any time you have a big regional collaboration like this, you realize all the things that you're missing. You start talking about the elements that weren't included in this particular phase of the Mountain Accord, and something that's come up recently is a desire that there needs to be a rail network potentially from Provo to Ogden along that Wasatch back to handle that growth going forward. But it does come down to the premise. If you believe it's coming, do you want to manage it? There's also the belief that if you don't provide for it, maybe it won't come. But that hasn't been our experience thus far on the Wasatch Back.
Yeah, just add a little bit to that. What you see around the world with transit development, when you've got high capacity transit and you provide stations in appropriate areas, and you provide adequate parking for people to be able to get from their cars onto the transit. You see land use patterns, as long as you have development regulations and zoning and comprehensive plans that support it, you see the land use patterns start to develop around the stations, and you create this environment in these neighborhoods where people are no longer dependent on their car for every trip. Transit-oriented development is also pedestrian and bike-friendly. So it allows people to live in places where they can bike to more locations, they can walk to more locations, And for farther destinations, they can get on the transit and they can ride there. And that's a big part of the intent of the transit proposals that are part of Mountain Accord, is to be able to support that kind of land use vision to prevent future sprawl or limit future sprawl.
Okay, do we have another environment question? Yeah, Thea. Can we get her a mic?
So I should forget, not to worry. For Peter, as an icon of environmentalism, what's your favorite part about the environmental component of Mountain Accord? Just like the thing that gets you the most jazzed.
Okay, that's a great question. And I think the way to, the question is, what part of the Mountain Accord from an environmental perspective gets me most jazzed? And what I would say is, after 25 years in the community here, it seems like I could tell the history of my residency here in Park City and with Black Diamond as a series of battles over development and preservation. And to the question a moment ago, it's that we have this push me, pull me attitude here in Utah, in Summit County, in Park City, in the Wasatch Front about we want growth, but we don't want it. We want growth, but we don't want it. We're doing everything to get the growth, to create the jobs, to attract people to come to the community. But at the same time, we don't want to deal with all the issues that come with that. And as I look at that and the growing populations that we have, many of the areas, especially in the cottonwoods, on the public lands, on the Forest Service lands, that we think are protected, they're not protected permanently. And so I look at this Wasatch as a pie, and it's been pretty well divvied up. We have a watershed for Salt Lake City. We have world-class ski areas. We've got this beautiful mountain town called Park City. We have amazing mountain biking. We have incredible backcountry skiing, trail running, climbing, mountaineering, wildflowers in Albion. And everybody in this room, many people here believe this sort of homeostasis that has developed here is the homeostasis that will prevail and go into the future because they don't see any development. Oh, that's Forest Service land. It's not going to change. It's not true. So many of these areas that we take for granted that are our favorite wildflower walks and our favorite hikes and our favorite backcountry ski trips and our favorite trail runs, they could be developed into ski areas. They could be expanded. And right now, the question in front of us is, do we strike some kind of grand bargain and try to avoid one more battle after another, or do we not? So what gets me most excited or enthused from an environmental standpoint about Mountain Accord, it's the potential, and we're not there yet, it is the potential to strike some kind of, quote, grand bargain where we can quit 25 years of one battle after another over ski link or this ski area expansion or this road or that, and say these backcountry spots that so many in the community so love, these wildflower meadows that so many of us in this community so love, this fresh water that we take for granted because we don't need to buy bottled water in the Wasatch Front that we take for granted, we can preserve now and quit worrying about battle after battle after battle. So that's what gets me most enthused about having participated in this and to continue to participate in it, is the hope and the chance that we might be able to find some future scenario that we can all agree upon that's not perfect, but that can preserve so much of what we hold near and dear, that has defined this community in so many ways, and not have to risk its loss into the future.
I let him go longer than 2 minutes because I like you. Okay, let's move on to recreation. No, we don't. Okay, nobody cares. That's fine. All right, economy. All right. Let's talk about recreation. What questions do we have? Yeah.
I'm seeing some orange squiggly lines here that I assume are intended to represent trails. Are we talking hiking trails or are we talking biking trails?
Yeah, very good question. Who's going to take that?
So the discussion's been primarily with hiking and biking trails where they can be accommodated. Both Park City and the Wasatch Front already have a great network of trails for biking and hiking primarily. And so the idea was also to articulate where we can balance each other's assets that we have on one side or the other, whether we have great mountain biking or great hiking trails, and provide a little bit better connectivity in some strategic places where it makes sense and can provide a great recreation opportunity. We also have some trails available for horseback riding, but because of the watershed protection measures that we have on the Wasatch Front side, there are limited trails available for horseback riding.
Great.
Can I talk about this one just because I get excited about trails?
Don't try to bike with them, but yeah, you can take it.
I'll keep it quick. We've spent so much time talking about transportation in general on this that we haven't talked about the trails, which is something I think most folks up here would be passionate about. Certainly we've put a lot of energy into a nice trail network for Park City and a walkability network. And part of what we're trying to accomplish is to bring some of that over to the Cottonwood Canyons. There's not good ways to access those canyons that aren't in cars. And so one great way to get people up those canyons is to put in trails at the mouths, take them up the side, increase bike lanes. And then there's also some cross canyon trails being proposed right now. In particular, one I'm excited about would be one that would connect Park City all the way over to Snowbird on a mid-mountain style intermediate trail, which we see as being very popular in the summertime.
Another recreation question. Yeah, okay.
How will you know when recreation is too much and it's affecting the environment that's being preserved?
That's a big question, and it's one that we've been grappling with. And Kathy, do you want to take that? She's used to answering hard questions.
How much is too much? That's the capacity question, I believe. And that is a good question. I mean, we grapple with that. Our current forest plan on the other side of the mountain, on the National Forest side, addresses capacity by limiting the amount of increase in parking areas. And if we're looking at transporting more people in by whatever means, that of course changes our capacity measures that we have with the function of parking. So we're going to have to put some stipulations in place, if you will, as to what's the quality of experience we want people to have on the National Forest as well as the resorts and even the Park City side, as far as what is the experience people come here for, what's the experience we can provide, and then what are some factors that start changing that mix or that experience that we might want to retract or provide other measures to limit use.
So I want to add on to that just a little bit. The recreation team that came up with the recreation, goals and metrics and idealized systems spent a lot of time on this and suggested high, medium, and low use nodes, so that right now we have a big range of experiences that you can have in the Wasatch. You can have a really solitude experience, or you can go ride the Mid-Mountain Trail and have a more social experience. And what we want to do is make sure that 50 years from now, we still have that range of experiences. So they put a lot of time into identifying, hey, these are areas where we think we can accommodate more people, certainly at the base of the resorts. There's medium use nodes and low use nodes. And those are all mapped out on the idealized system.
I think we passed that point about 10, 15 years ago, didn't we?
Okay, right here, yeah.
Speaking of capacity, at what point do these folks feel that we may have already reached our capacity? And I'll give an example.
You the mic.
Yeah, hang on just a second. Let's get you a mic.
I'll give you an example about capacity. The county spends or gives to the Chamber of Commerce every year $6 million to spend on advertising, trying to bring people here from Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, and other large cities. Recently, we had a traffic jam that was so immense that it hopefully woke up some of our politicians to the problem that we are now going to have. And the problem, as I see it, is overcapacity. We have now generated so much interest in Park City that maybe we should do something to try to stop the growth.
Okay. That's a 15 seconds left, sorry.
If I still have 15 seconds.
Well, that sounds like an Andy question.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Since you're warmed up, lead off, Chris.
Okay.
I appreciate that, Christian. I think that that's delving a little bit into a transportation question, but I will still digress into an answer. We all recognize, I think, that we've created this golden goose here that is attracting a lot of people. That's why we're all here. That's why we have a successful ski resort economy. And we continue to promote it to tourists so that they will come, but we also get people buying second homes and wanting to live here permanently. And I think that's, we're a victim of our own success in that regard. I think the key in the future to avoid the kinds of things like occurred on December 29th, the so-called Carmageddon, is we have got to get more transit solutions. And underlying all of the systems groups, for them to be successful, for us to protect the economy, to have a successful economy, protect the environment, a successful economy, and to promote recreation, is we've got to figure out how we can move people around. And a big part of that has got to be, we've got to do it without vehicles. We cannot handle any more cars. And so I'm not going to say any more because we're going to have 15 minutes plus on transportation in a few minutes, I hope.
Okay, more recreation questions, yeah.
Direct your question at a panel member.
I don't know. My question is in regards to the One Wasatch concept that's out and been out for a long time, and it seems to get a lot of steam right now. So I'm wondering what the Mountain Accord, if they're working with One Wasatch, or what Mountain Accord's thoughts are with potential One Wasatch, because I think a lot of the things parallel, especially with the environment and the recreation. So just kind of curious to where you guys stand with One Wasatch.
I'll be glad to answer that. And the agreement that we came to, at least with the Cottonwoods Working Group, is that we're looking for a singular solution at this moment to the transportation needs of the Cottonwoods and the Wasatch Front, and ultimately what happens here in Park City and Summit County is really up to Park City and Summit County. They did not participate in the Canyons group. But the fundamental premise we were working on is that we are looking for a singular solution, and if we have that singular solution, then One Wasatch is out. If One Wasatch is still in the running, then the other solutions that we're talking about or proposing or attempting to find consensus on would fall apart.
Does anybody else want to make a comment on One Wasatch?
I remember when Ski Utah brought One Wasatch forward and some were critical of its timing. I thought it was excellent timing to get it in the mix, get it out on the table for discussion in this Greater Mountain Accord process. I think that there are lots of opinions on both sides of whether it's good or bad. I think that the Wasatch, the Cottonwood Canyons, there's quite a few constituent groups over there that don't like it. I think on our side, we're connecting, whether we like it or not, canyons and Park City Resort. At least that's the direction I think things are going. And so our resorts, Deer Valley is easy to connect to the Vail-owned resorts. That part of it, our side of it, is fairly easy. It's what happens on the back, on the front side, the Cottonwood Canyon side, and that's fraught with a lot of controversy. And there's been a task force of the Cottonwood Canyons have been trying to horse trade that out, and it's yet to be seen. This whole process, that's in the mix still.
Let me use this a little bit more. And part of the reason to elaborate on what Chris said, that it is controversial and it's something where there's a lot of passion involved with it, is that with that component of One Wasatch, when you get over the Cottonwoods, you will, by default, transform a huge amount of backcountry terrain into side country and front country. And you also will, in some shape, manner, or form, affect the watershed that is a big part of what the Mountain Accord has been about. So there's a whole set of other issues that come into play at that time, and that is why we over there were attempting to find one solution as opposed to many solutions.
Yeah, Kathy, go ahead.
What's the question?
He said that it sounds like environmental priorities are a higher priority than One Wasatch in the Cottonwood Canyons area. And Kathy Kalo is going to make a comment on that.
Well, on just on the concept of One Wasatch, for years the Forest Service, over decades, has received different requests about whether it's called Interconnect, whether it's called Ski Link, whether it's called One Wasatch. There's been a variety of requests over the years about connecting to Park City. And one of the great things about our involvement in this Mountain Accord process, it's really the first time that both the Forest Service is understanding what the Park City side is interested in, what they're not interested in, as well as the Salt Lake side as far as that connecting, whether it's gondolas, whether it's tunnels, whether it's trains. It's really been a great eye-opening experience for us just to see what the public desires are or are not for some type of connectivity.
Okay, right here, yeah.
So this is really not my question. My friend Bullwinkle asked me to ask this. Is anyone looking at how this affects wildlife? Probably Kathy could answer that, but how does it affect the wildlife that live in these areas?
So when we go through the NEPA process, when we have a more concrete proposal about what it is we want to move forward with, those effects to wildlife as well as cultural resources as well as all the other attributes that are out there, especially on federal land, will be analyzed to the effects of. And that's generally done through the NEPA process.
Just to add something to that, there have been a lot of unexpected good things that have come out of the Mountain Accord, and one of them is Joan DeJoria and Ann Ober, who were the co-chairs of our environmental group, heard from the group repeatedly that we don't have good environmental baselines. So how are we supposed to know whether we're protecting, enhancing, or what are we doing with the Wasatch if we don't know what the current state is, and how do we measure it going forward? So they have spent some time working with the Nature Conservancy out of Colorado that's put together a baseline scoring system that we're going to incorporate into the Mountain Accord. I believe it's going to be funded by Salt Lake County or the Mountain Accord. We're discussing the funding now, but that's something we're going to move forward with almost immediately, getting those baselines established and then having a good scoring system where every year the wildlife and the ecosystems can be evaluated to see if we're making positive progress or we're doing harm in the Wasatch.
Okay, one more question, and let's move on to economy, right back here with the blue hat. Can we get her a mic? Okay, Andrea's running as fast as she can. Go, Speed Racer.
I think that mine's pretty quick, so it's good to end with. I'm wondering at what point in the process, because I know this is the first step, in terms of recreation, you'll be discussing areas that will be non-motorized versus motorized, and maybe even further down the line, you know, dog-friendly, you know, how you're just gonna get us all recreating happily together. Trying to play.
I think we took a vote on the dog issue and said we weren't touching it with a 10-foot pole.
She was doing really well before she added that dog piece. And motorized, non-motorized.
Well, just a quick answer on the motorized and non-motorized. In terms of the recreation group recommendations for that in the and additional protections on Forest Service lands, they said just let's keep the balance as it is today. So Mountain Accord hasn't really proposed any changes to any motorized use. I'll give you a short answer. Let's change topics over to economy. Growth, development, what are our economic needs? We have a question in red shirt back there.
Thank you. I applaud your efforts. However, I come away with a distinct impression after looking at your website and sitting here tonight that we're being asked to buy a pig in a poke. And the two things that are obviously missing, from my perspective, are number one, what is the estimated cost involved with this project and projects? And two, much more importantly, how do you propose to pay for it?
So the stage that we're at right now, which is very conceptual, we've done some very rough order of magnitude cost estimates for some elements, the most expensive ones. But again, those are very rough order of magnitude estimates. And right now we have what we're proposing to go forward with the blueprint is a range of actions. So the actual cost is a very wide range of what it could cost, from the low end to the high end. In terms of how to pay for it, that's also in the same stage. We have ideas. We've talked with at least the Federal Transit Administration about options for getting federal funding for some transit elements. We've talked about the need to look at local funding sources, state funding sources, other federal funding sources, user fees, a variety of methods. But we haven't done a lot of analysis or proposed any specific way to fund it. We know there's a lot of options and there's a lot of opportunities out there. As part of the environmental impact statement, that's when we will also be doing some detailed cost estimating and getting more information and more understanding of the funding options as well.
In other words, that's a non-answer.
Is that a non-answer? You want to know the rough range of costs for the... Okay, so the range from the low end to the high end, at least for the transit elements, which would be the most expensive, is, well, for the alternatives we're proposing to carry forward into EIS are somewhere around $500 million or so at the low end for all of it, up to about $3 billion or so for the highest piece. And that includes express bus on I-80, a variety of options, bus rapid transit or light rail transit up Little Cottonwood Canyon over to Park City, bus rapid transit or light rail transit in the Snyderville Basin, 224 and 248, and a variety of other transit improvements as well.
And I think one of my messages to the audience would be is the gentleman asked, what will it cost? And we don't have an it yet. You know, we don't have a decided it yet. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next couple of years. Let's get another question.
Right over there.
Yeah, okay.
So I guess I'll direct my questions to Mr. Robinson, since he is my representative. And I'll piggyback on what Mr. Andrews just said about the website. I'm a school teacher, and my 8th and 9th graders reviewed the mountainaccord.com website today and yesterday, and they were utterly befuddled. They could not for the life of them figure out what it was trying to say, what the objective was. After further research, it's our understanding, and Mr. Robinson, perhaps you can correct us if we're wrong, that to date, $4.5 million has been spent to study this, and apparently we're asking the legislature for an additional $5 million to study it. The cost that we came up with after our research was that in the grand scheme of things, to build out with the optimal plan, we're looking at about $6 billion. Now, I gotta tell you, I teach some of the smartest, savviest 8th and 9th graders in the state. And it didn't take them long to look at a map and see that coming up I-80 is a heck of a lot shorter than taking light rail to Sandy and then hauling through the mountain. I get it, I've got 15 seconds. So I'm asking my representative, Mr. Robinson, if he could please address the issues that we have right now with transportation before we move on to economic development in Sandy. It seems like this whole thing is going to come at a cost to Park City.
Hey, I would like to remind you that we're here for civic public dialogue. Let's have a civil meeting here. Let Chris answer.
That was a great question, and I have appeared with your class, and I agree with your assessment of their intellect. I think that, first of all, as to how this phase 1 has been funded, it is true that the legislature, which has a parsimonious history, has parted with some, I think, $5 million to date. I don't know if the 4.5 is right, but it's some significant, it's a seven-figure number. And it's true that they are considering funding the second phase. The rest of the money has been funded by some 20 other participants. Summit County has put in $25,000 a year. Park City, similar amount. Sandy, Salt Lake County, Salt Lake City, so forth. As to, our homegrown transportation problems, the ones that now exist, we've done a lot of studies, and they're going to take hundreds of millions of dollars to make a difference. And we had an open house at the Richards building not long ago. Some of you attended it. It had like transit light, which was like $200 million. And to do the full-on was like close to $400 million, and that barely even moved the needle. One of the things that, why I get jazzed, I guess, to parrot off Peter's question about the Mountain Accord is I have hopes that it is going to help us bring to bear the kind of attention we need to solve our problems here in transit solutions. Now, what the it is, how much it's going to cost, if everything were done, a big loop of light rail up Parleys and down through the Cottonwoods and everywhere, yeah, it adds up, based on the estimates, to some $6 billion. Do I think that's going to happen in my lifetime? No. But I think that what will be key to funding this is and I think the reason the legislature is interested in it is they believe that, and many believe that by regionally collaborating, that the economic pie will be made bigger, and from that bigger pie there will be opportunities in the public and private sector and federal sector to leverage that larger pie to get more money. Now, how that all works, that's what the EIS is for, and what the it is, That's why there's all kinds of alternatives and sub-alternatives that need to be studied. And what we're going to be deciding on the 6th of April or thereafter, the Executive Board of Mountain Accord, is to decide what we want to study from here. And that's why we need all of your input. And thank you all for coming.
Okay, let's have another question.
Laney, can I add to that just
Oh,
a little
yeah,
bit?
yeah, sure.
So in a regional effort like this, you start out at ground zero, and I think we started out at a point where no one along the Wasatch Front even understood we had a traffic problem. They all thought we'd be happy to be connected to them so we could go over and ski Alta and Snowbird. And that's something that we have been able to educate them, as well as they've educated us on their challenges, that our 224 is the same challenge as their Little Cottonwood. And so we've looked at those. If you look at a map, I-80 is the obvious choice for those of us who live here. We'd love to have a train or something up I-80. Is there any way that wouldn't? As opposed to, okay. Unfortunately, that isn't on the menu at this point. When you look at a corridor like that, it's run by the Federal Highways Administration, and they look at those at capacity. And the first thing they check is, can you get up it faster if we install train? Could you get that up there faster than if you drive your car? And we're nowhere close. That's quite an effective corridor. But through our involvement in the Mountain Accord, that has now become a topic that we're looking at, we're studying, and we've compelled upon the group that we would like to see a more effective bus system up there, a rapid bus or an express bus, and some solutions along 224. So it has been an education process, and starting from zero, I think we're a lot closer to having the state and the Wasatch Front understand our traffic challenges up here and working with us to offer some alternatives that we could never afford or implement on our own.
Okay, well, we moved into transportation, so I think that's okay. Transportation or economic questions? All right.
Hi. I think that when I see the economic, the environmental, and the recreation stuff, it seems almost like a carrot, like, look at all this great stuff we're doing, but when it comes down to it, it's this transportation that we keep seeing, this tunnel coming up the Cottonwood Canyons connecting Park City, which does not, in my opinion, help Park City. What it's doing is fanning the economic development along the Wasatch Front. And there's so much push for that on the Wasatch Front in the state legislature. We see senators asking for $5 million from the state legislature, and the reason he says he wants $5 million for the Mountain Accord is in a bid to get the Olympics back here. So if you're really trying to protect the environment, then that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about getting the Olympics back here, and there weren't even Olympic events in the Cottonwood Canyons because we didn't want all these people going there. So if the senator's asking for $5 million to fund the Mountain Accord to bring the Olympics here, then what are we really talking about? We're talking about building these ski trains, and we hear that only 5% of Utah people ski. It's not really being built for the people that live here. It's not being built to help people that live here. It's being helped build to fan the economic development in Sandy and all those towns along the Wasatch Front. And how are we gonna get our voices heard if they outnumber us over 1 million people down there?
Hey, listen, we want to make sure we can hear all voices, and I think it's intimidating if you get too much guffawing and applauding, then it's hard for other people to have their voice heard. So let's hear some voices here.
Okay, I'll guffaw first. No. Rich, those are all very good questions. I think the last one I want to address first, which is how can we have our voice heard? The executive board has really just 2 members on it, Andy and I, that are your elected officials. There's one from Wasatch County, and there are others that have connections to Summit County, but not in an official capacity where they're answering to you, the public. It's a consensus-based plan, and we have a charter, and one of the tenets of that charter that's being held inviolate is that Mountain Accord will not supersede local land use authority, and it will not supersede our right to govern our own destinies here. And so it's a consensus, it's based on consent. And we have been vigilant in making sure on Mountain Accord that we preserve that. And so that is, at the end of the day, if we believe Mountain Accord is doing this community harm, or what's being proposed, we're going to object to it, and we're told, and we are holding people to that word, that it won't happen in our front yard. Now, as to the first part of the question, I'm going to let Andy answer that. And then I'll
well played. Rich, I can see where if you follow the money, you look back and you see the majority of it coming from the legislature, you have to be suspicious on that. I think we have good reason for that. I'll stop there. But when we look at how the Mountain Accord was formed, it was really convened by Mayor Becker, Mike Allegra, and Mayor Caroon while he was still in office. And our mayor, Mayor Williams at the time, was invited to participate, as was Chris, representing the Summit County Council. And that's really the core group. Mayor Williams was involved in a lot of other projects, so it ended up in my lap, so I ended up representing Park City. But we started out with a small group of all local governments that led the Mountain Accord, and that has continued to be the driving board behind this. And we have all contributed money. The state has had fairly minimal involvement, I would say, for the amount of money they've contributed. They certainly have hopes that this will create a new economic engine for the entire region. I think they also have hopes that it's going to put to bed some long-standing challenges at the top of those Cottonwood Canyons that have just vexed them for 25 years. They are always the monkey in the middle when there's, you've got the resorts, you've got the environmental groups, and you have the private landholders, and that's taken up a lot of effort and time, and there's been a lot of controversy up there. So I think they like this for a variety of reasons. They certainly have outcomes I think they would like to see, but if you look at the composition of the executive board and the folks driving this, it's all local government, and I think we're involved for our own reasons, which is to preserve the legacy of the Wasatch.
Okay, can we get another question?
Yes, thank you so very much. I truly appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you today. As I look around the room, I see probably a lot of homeowners that live here, and I'm a homeowner that lives here and has lived here for 20 years. And as I look at the panel and what was just talked about, the governmental agencies coming together, I guess the biggest concern that I personally have is am I the one that is paying for it and going to continue to pay for it in my taxes, my property taxes, and yet I see, besides Black Diamond, I see no major stakeholders, and those stakeholders are the resorts. What are they doing to help us in our transportation? What are they doing to contribute, both financially and otherwise, so that we have a greater confident feeling that it isn't the homeowners and the citizens of Summit County, Wasatch County, and Salt Lake County that are going to carry the burden of this financially.
The resorts are represented on the Mountain Accord board through Ski Utah, Nathan Rafferty being the executive director. The resorts themselves, our resorts in this community, are very involved with the county and Park City in studying transportation issues. In fact, we had a meeting today on this topic, and we'll have many more in the future. And they're very eager to be participants in helping us solve our big problems. They're their problems too. People aren't going to come here if and spend money at their resorts and stay in their hotels and eat in their restaurants if they can't have a good experience or if they're stuck in a traffic jam. And so they're very interested not only in Mountain Accord, but in helping us on the local level solve our problems. And we hope Mountain Accord will help us solve them too.
So I had a question, kind of actually linking back to economy as well as transportation, of how much discussion there has been, if any, in the amount of actual education, and I don't mean necessarily traditional classroom education, but just educating the public in general via more than just a public forum on how to get involved in things like transportation. I know for me, myself, I'm one of the regular Park City bus riders, and I'm constantly amazed by the number of people I engage in regular conversation that complain about transportation, but they're not on the bus with me. So how much is that going to go into the actual economic side? Because there's huge potential there.
I'll take a stab at that. There is no easy answer, and I think this comes back to the push me, pull me attitude that Peter brought up earlier. I mean, I think we would all like everybody else to take the bus. So,
Andy came on the bus tonight.
It's a battle. It's a battle in this community because we're all busy people and we all have kids and dogs and equipment we need to transport, and we want to get it here, there, and everywhere because we want to ski, bike, and go to work and spend time with our family all in the same day. But we're going to continue. The city and the county have been working on our education programs. The city just launched a new bus app, and I believe the county has one in the works. It's a launch jet that's going to make things easier. We're getting better visuals on the bus stop. We're working hard to do a better job educating our tourists before they book their trips. If we can get them to not bring a car up from the airport, that's half the battle. At that point, they'll realize how easy it is to get around on our free system. But your point is well taken, and it's something that we are working on every day right now. How do we better utilize this fantastic system we have?
Can I put in a little plug too? So this really makes me think about the fact that right now we're trying to get comments and input from the public, from all of you. And if you're a bus rider, go onto the website, leave us a comment. What got you to ride the bus? What makes you a regular bus rider? What really motivated you to do it? And do you have any ideas on how we can better educate other people on using transit and not driving their cars as much? So we want a sort of collective education, collective information from everybody up here to help us make the blueprint better, help us make implementation of it more successful.
Oh, well, okay, well, why don't we let's answer your question here and then. Oh, am I supposed to be calling on the people that are queued up on the sides? Oh, okay, gotcha, okay. Okay, gotcha.
First, I want to thank Lainey personally. I think the first time we spoke 18, 20 months ago, Park City was not so much on the agenda for this. It was more Salt Lake, Little and Big Cottonwood Canyon. So we're glad you're here. I would say to those that think that this traffic issue could be limited or reduced at this point, to realize that the population of the county is going to double. You haven't seen anything yet. I would be far more concerned, and I think we all should be, about what the cost will be if we don't move forward with a plan, rather than working on a plan as these guys have come to us with. So, thank you.
Okay, right over here, Andrea.
I just wonder if the possibility of changing snowfall amounts has been a part of anyone's discussion, and if so, in what way?
Well, I mean, I think I want to frame this up for some of the, this has been a topic that was studied very hard. I mean, we took a lot of science to look at the climate change information, and Laura Briefer here in the audience who's texting, she's probably texting me something to say. Can you give me, actually worked with the University of Utah to look at the climate science. And so some of the goals that you'll see through the environmental group are to create systems that are resilient to climate change and reduce emissions. So that's why you're seeing such a focus on transit. Some of the blueprint proposals are to really look at year-round transit, things that can be used whether we're skiing or not, summertime activities, hiking, mountain biking. So that's why you're seeing a focus on that, because that's resilient even in the amidst uncertain snowfall in the future. I'll let the panel members.
I just wanted to emphasize that this isn't the transit or transportation solutions are not skier only. This is a four-season undertaking that that would benefit all of those areas. And I was going to make a cheap joke about we're going to spend less on road salt and put that into our transit, but I think that we want a balanced economy that's diversified away from just snow sports, and this will help that, I think.
Okay, right here.
Working? It's good. Chuck Klingenstein for the record, and specifically Kathy, if you could take a shot at this one. Having watched NEPA processes not only in this state but throughout the West and the nation, and NEPA being the EIS that may assumably occur, I would like to see it be as clean as possible. And Legacy Highway is probably our biggest faux pas out there in recent memory. So what I would like to know, and I'm going to go assume that you may be the lead agency on this, and I'm assuming even if a blueprint gets pushed forward, the purpose and needs statement, the resultant preferred alternatives will be developed independent of that blueprint. And I would also hope that if it hasn't been discussed, whoever the consultant team is on the NEPA process have no dog in the fight for the future, meaning they would not do any work, engineering related or any other work in the future. They would solely focus on a clean NEPA process that is their sole interest in this. So that maybe the ending process with the record of decision and the administrative record truly supports a public purpose at the end of the day. I would like to know if your thoughts on the whole NEPA process. Thank you.
So we've been in discussions about the NEPA process with the other federal agencies that may be involved, and it really depends on the scope of the project, what the proposed action is going to be, which has not been specifically determined yet. We have a lot of ideas out there, but once it's more formulated after this public review, public scoping period, and we start talking about going into the NEPA process, it's going to be about what is it we're trying to do? What's the action we're proceeding with? Is it transportation? Is it, well, it'll be transportation of some sort. Is it federal designations? Is it recreation improvements? Is it trails? Whatever is in the mix is what would go into the NEPA process. However, with this process with many facets, it's going to be complicated because we have a lot of different variables in there. We have transportation, we have recreation, we have environmental, and land, potential land acquisition and trades. So it's going to be very complicated. So our effort would be to streamline it the best we can, but there might be other avenues that are moved forward on in addition to the NEPA process, that each individual organization may take on their component of whatever it is that we collectively work on and agree on.
Has there been any discussion as to whether,
I think your question is a good question, and I think there are a lot of agencies that have that policy in place that there isn't allowed to be any follow-on financial benefit or work by the consulting team that's conducting the actual EIS. And I think that's a great great feedback and a good comment, and it certainly is done in many parts of the country. Yeah.
Chuck, I think that's feedback that's worth taking back to the executive board and discussing, so thank you.
Okay, I think we've got one that's been waiting over here.
Hi, I'm a retired citizen. And first of all, I'd like to address the bus from Salt Lake City. What is its ridership? Second, they're talking about putting in a new bus system in Park City to bring people to the ski area. Most retired people cannot walk 3-4 blocks up and down hill carrying their skis, wearing their boots, or carrying their ski boots. Is there any thought that you're going to have to put in lockers at the ski area so people could go to the ski area and not use their bus? And not use their car. There has to be a way that people could go skiing, and it has to be convenient. I'm from New York City. I've used public transportation my whole life. The public transportation in Park City is inconvenient.
I like the bus here.
I think that the points you hit on are right on, in the sense that for our transit to be successful, it's got to be convenient, it's got to be fast, it's got to be a good experience, it's got to be fun, it's got to be cost effective. And so all of those things of, if it's too far to walk to the destination, if you have to haul your gear, schlep your gear around, if you have to wait in the cold for a long time and you don't wind up, you miss the bus because you don't have good sense for when it's coming or which one you should take. All of those elements need to go in to create a workable transit system. And so, yeah, we thought about, those all need to be there, or we'll have a transit system that doesn't get used the way it needs to. And I might add also, one of the things this community suffers from is that we didn't start out with transit in mind. We started out with the automobile in mind, and our growth pattern has been based on that. And so now we're playing catch up, where we're trying to, we have to not only build a transit system, but we also need to meld our land use and our development patterns so that they will dovetail with that and make that successful. And so if we were starting from scratch, we'd have a different land use, I hope, that would be more transit oriented.
Okay, I'm going to take a brief pause here, and I want to let you know that if you want to go outside and talk to team members, there is an open house set up. We're going to stay here. We're going to stay. If you want to go outside, you can. There's refreshments. And I do want to offer, I do want to thank the Park City School District for making this facility available, especially Dave Howick, and also the Park City Institute, Joel, Jenny, Max, and Jim. And let's give them all a hand of Okay, so let's keep going. So how about you right here? Let's get Christian a mic. Did we already hear from him once? I've been threatened. No muzzling.
No, you haven't been threatened. Just a common courtesy thing. Andy, I heard you on KPCW being interviewed by Leslie Thatcher recently. And you said that you still had an open mind with regard to a rail system coming over from Big Cottonwood Canyon. And I'm wondering how that comports with what the Park City Council and what I think the Summit County Council feel. Pretty dead set against that. And I like what Roger Armstrong's position seems to be, and that is no way ever.
Well, I can speak to the Park City Council. I'll let Chris talk about the County Council. But Park City is fairly unanimous in our opinion right now, which is we have grave concerns about a connection. We are not willing to take it off the table at this point because we would like to get some additional information. And we're not interested in taking options off the table when we have precious few. That being said, we have put some strong criteria in place with the Mountain Accord. We've asked for an economic impact study. We have told them we would not be interested in even considering a connection until we see a viable plan to deal with our traffic challenges on 224, 248. We haven't seen any alignments, so we don't know what that looks like. We don't know what cost looks like. If those don't come back to our satisfaction, we may choose to take a hard line and say we're not interested in that connection. But at this point, we're still gathering information, and to be honest, we haven't had time for public process, and so we're waiting to hear from all of you.
I think the county's position is very similar. If we had to decide today, based on what we know, the council has taken previous votes, or we've expressed our opinions that we would be against a connection. I think we have varying degrees of grave concern, from hell no to I want to see all the facts, among 5 different unique individuals that have their own opinions on the council. But we think that we still need to be at the table, and we think that we need to enshrine some principles in it that, number one, that it's not going to be forced upon us, and number 2, that we're only going to do it if it makes sense for us to do. And so far, in many minds, the case hasn't been made that it makes sense. I still believe, and I've said this many times, that I think good will come out of Mountain Accord, Summit County's involvement in it. What that looks like, I can't say. Can I categorically say that it will not involve a connection between the Cottonwood Canyons and Park City? For me, I can't say that. So it's not an absolute no. It's very concerned, wanting to keep our veto rights and options open, but also want to see the full picture before we prejudge it. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I might just address that as a representative of the Outdoor Industry Association, and just speaking from a recreationalist perspective and looking at the alternatives between potentially putting lifts across to the Cottonwoods versus putting a tunnel in. I would choose to have a tunnel through there because it doesn't do any environmental damage across the top. It leaves the ridge lines pristine as they are now. It leaves the backcountry pristine as it is now. And it's a clean way to move people who want to recreate, whether it's skiers, hikers, wildflower walkers, anyone else who is on this side of the range. So if you think about it from the standpoint of a resort community that has a hotel bed base and restaurant base and wants to offer the most amount of amenities and opportunities, that's a pretty quick way to get people over there without them hopping in their automobiles with the pollution, with the traffic, with the congestion, driving out to Kimball, down Kimball, along the front, and then up Little Cottonwood Canyon. Very quick, very efficient to do that. So I think it has some advantages from that perspective of bringing people over. Secondly, from the standpoint of an interconnect, I would personally rather see an interconnect where we have these 6 world-class skiers here. There is some touring between them, and you want to get back quickly, you can get back via potentially a tunnel and a train that would take you back here. So I think both from the standpoint of a recreational hub that Park City is, and from the standpoint of quality of life for the people who live here and the number of people who go over there to recreate, it's certainly cut down dramatically on automobiles and enhanced Park City as an attractive bed base for people who want to go over there. That said, I certainly recognize there's a myriad of environmental and other issues associated with that. So without getting into where would you do it and how would you do it, I'm not going to go there, but from a conceptual standpoint, I think it deserves to be looked at as seriously as one Wasatch.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad this topic has finally
come up. My feeling from the public point of view is that a tunnel, the concept of a tunnel, although having the benefits that you've just described is appealing, the cost would be so prohibitive that I think it would hamper the rest of the benefits that the Mountain Accord is trying to accomplish. It seems to me the Cottonwood Canyons have their own set of problems, just as Park City has its set of problems, and that those should be resolved in those two areas before any kind of interconnect, particularly a tunnel, should be done. And just the concept is going to torpedo this project, in my opinion, because it sounds so foolhardy for the cost. If you take that cost out and put all the other programs in effect that you want to accomplish, I think you'd have a much easier time to do it. I can understand trying to create a concept for the state that's going to, the concept is great, but I think it's unrealistic. And Park City has some definite problems that you gentlemen have just addressed as I was trying to get my question asked. And I think that's where we need to focus. A lot of our problem is created by people who live here who commute. There are people commuting to Salt Lake. There are people commuting up here to work. And those problems somehow need to be resolved. And maybe a light rail going down Parley's, people could hop right on it and get to their place of work and to the airport, and all of those things might be a lot more effective than building a tunnel. Thank you very much.
I'll take a shot at that one. And I think I told you guys I was going to say this more than once tonight. Mountain Accord is not intended to replace our regional efforts. And we are very aware of the transportation challenges, and it is something that is an absolute top priority for both Park City and Summit County. And I would not say that our efforts are being diluted by participating on Mountain Accord. We see that as something that will potentially be complementary, and it's for that reason we've participated in it. But it isn't in place of the hard work we need to do locally, so we continue to work at that. And as far as the cost goes, you're right, the costs are daunting, it scares a lot of us, but again, we're talking a whole spectrum. We're talking idealized scenario, the idealized scenario that's being presented in that blueprint is rail. But that doesn't mean we might determine that for environmental reasons or cost reasons that rail doesn't make sense and fall back to rapid bus or express bus or some other combination of transportation system that might be a better fit for us. But we're starting kind of looking at the Cadillac, and we might work our way down to a Honda Accord.
I would like to make a comment. Comment primarily to my elected, appointed representatives to the Mountain Accord and the program director. There's been a lot of comment in the last week or two about the ridiculousness of the tunnel, train, rapid bus connection between Little Cottonwood Canyons and Park City. And besides the ridiculous cost, I do think it's a growth-inducing type of transportation improvement that will just make it that much more difficult for us to manage our local growth and traffic. That said, I urge both of you, Andy and Chris, to go back to your respective councils and adopt a joint resolution that says we are in opposition to that link and we want it removed before the April 9th executive committee vote so that it doesn't go into the EIS process and become embedded. And then if you are not successful at getting that done, remove funding, any further funding from the Mountain Accord process and become a vocal opponent to that connection during the EIS process. Would you both please comment on that?
I'd be happy to. And don't think for a minute that we don't have those internal debates all the time of, do we pull the plug on this? Is it, should we just say no now? is there no good in Mountain Accord? In fact, we're having a work session tomorrow. The county council is on this topic, and we'll have had 2 of our members go to Europe this past week to look at transit systems there, and we'll have had they're all here tonight, had the benefit of these comments. You have a strong opinion on that. I'm not going to commit to you that we're going to do what you suggest. It's on the menu of options, but I'm not sure. We need to talk about it. I'm not sure. That wouldn't be my first choice today. I think we are preserving some off-ramps as we've used internally, exit ramps where we can pull the plug and preserve our ability to further gather information and to further participate. I think I won't say more than that, but your position is at one end of the spectrum of the options we're considering.
I think my answer is similar in terms of I thank you for your opinion, Clay, and I can guarantee you that we will be spending quite a bit of time talking about this as a council between now and April. I can't predict what our conclusion will be, but thus far our stance has been that we see both good and bad in the Mountain Accord. We believe that we are able to protect ourselves from the things that concern us, and we want to continue to get public feedback. So at this point, we believe we should stay at the table, but your recommendation is certainly one option that we will discuss.
Just to add a little bit to that, for the various pluses and minuses of the different alternatives, including a tunnel and a connection between Cottonwood Canyons and Park City, Guardsman's Pass was looked at, as Andy said, and one of the benefits of making a connection via transit, via a separate alignment using tunnels and above ground, was it would relieve the pressure to try and open up Guardsman's Pass to year-round traffic. And the thought of opening that to year-round traffic has got impacts for Marsac, more traffic into Park City, more traffic in the canyons, all contrary to some of the fundamental goals of Mountain Accord, which is to try and reduce impacts from cars.
I have a quick comment and a question. Thank you for your efforts. I think we all want to save the Wasatch. It's an important thing for everybody that lives on both sides of the Wasatch. But there are differences between the Cottonwoods and the Wasatch back. And there comes a point where you can't combine the two. And I think this tunnel scheme is a classic example of that. I see absolutely no benefit to this tunnel coming through the mountains, connecting the canyons with Park City. No benefits to Park City whatsoever. And I think we should concentrate more on our immediate problem on this side. And looking at the last page here, where you have alternatives proposed to advance for further consideration on that 224, 248. I see some that you've thrown out and some that you've saved. One of the ones you've thrown out is a bus-in managed lane, or both lanes, both routes, and it starts out large segments in both routes have just one traffic lane, which is not true. I drive 224 every day, and it has 2 lanes all the way, 4 lanes all the way. And so the bus and managed lane seems like it's one of the most reasonable solutions to our immediate problems here at Park City. And my question is, the 2 that you've saved include an exclusive guideway for the light rail transit and for the bus rapid transit. So this exclusive guideway, I really don't know what that is, but I'm assuming it's a whole total separate route. Why not incorporate a bus lane somehow in the existing routes?
Jeff, you want to take that?
Yeah, I could take that. So what I'm hearing you say is you'd like to see the bus and managed lane forwarded into the next phase. Is that right? So use like an existing lane on 224 and dedicate it to buses.
Well, I assume these exclusive guideways are going to take up a whole lot of space somewhere in a whole separate route or next to it.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Is that true? Instead of doing widen what we have so you do have a bus route, and it seems like that would be a cheaper alternative.
Yeah, the intent with the bus in its own lane or its own guideway, or light rail in its own guideway, was to not reduce the existing capacity of 224 to carry traffic. It would use the shoulder as much as possible, use as much of the existing right-of-way as we could to develop a separate lane just for buses or just for light rail, either mode. That way, those vehicles, the transit vehicles, aren't caught in the same congestion as cars are. It provides a much greater incentive for people to ride the bus or to ride light rail rather than take their car. It's part of the package of how you get people out of their cars and into transit. I think if there's support for taking an existing lane of 224 away from traffic and converting it to bus only or even light rail only, we can study that further. We could advance that in the next phase. It does mean, obviously, giving up a lot of existing auto capacity, which has an advantage to provide even more disincentive to drive because there's going to be even more congestion. So then it's a question of how much congestion are we willing to live with to create the incentives to put people on transit.
And Jim, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but we've recently received permission from UDOT and have run some pilot programs, which will likely become permanent, where the buses now use the emergency lane, which is also shared with the bike lane and pulled over cars. So it's an imperfect solution, but we do have an express bus lane there. And the hope would be, whether through Mountain Accord or through our own regional effort, is someday we would have a fixed lane so those buses can truly move quicker than cars, which is one of the best way to convert people over to transit, is when they're sitting in traffic and the bus goes racing by.
Sorry, right here.
I've spent most of my life, or business life, in Florida. I've been in real estate, I've been in development, and I don't want to see the mistakes that were made in Florida, in South Florida particularly, repeated here. I think that the focus of the Mountain Accord that I'm hearing is to bring more people into Park City. As a resident of Park City and somebody who loves the lifestyle, I see my great lifestyle disappearing. I have friends from other parts of the country who look and think, gee, I want their lifestyle because of what we have, the small town and things of this nature. And I think that if the Mountain Accord goes forward and there's tunnels and things of this nature, that our lifestyle is going to go downhill farther than it has. And I was involved in that traffic jam on, December 29th. And I think that there's a fundamental question. How much development is enough? How many people are enough? And I think a referendum about the lifestyle should go to the voters and see what they really want. Because I don't think the residents of Park City want more traffic and more people.
I think that you've heard a lot tonight about the tunnel because it's a very kind of stunning sort of proposal. And I think that one of the reasons that a lot of people have come out, and the reason that I came out, is that it seems to me from reading the website that there is so much pressure from the Wasatch Front. And the bare fact that there are 2 members on that executive committee from Summit County, and to my count, 14 or 15 who are specifically representing designations on the Wasatch Front. It may be a consensus process, but it's really hard to believe that the people who are involved in the Wasatch Front are not going to bring a lot of pressure to bear. And there's a lot of money behind that. And so I think just the way that that executive committee looks, for one thing, and the fact that before tonight, I have not heard Chris or Andy really talk about their grave concerns about the transportation solutions. And so I think we're going to really be paying attention to what you guys say from here on in. And we're really going to need a lot of convincing that Summit County is going to get the kind of representation that we can with a 2 to 15 or more to 17 ratio on that executive committee.
I'll jump on that and then follow me up if you want. But I think, as I said earlier, Park City and Summit County are somewhat founding members on this, and certainly the group's grown from a half dozen to 23, 24, 25 different entities. I would say we have played a fairly significant role with Chris as the co-chair or the vice chair of the executive board. I serve on the management team, which is a group of 7, which deals with the day-to-day operations. I represent the entire Wasatch back there. So we are outnumbered, but I would say we're in some strategic positions, and we are very much included in the process. Our staff have taken a critical role, and our citizens have stepped up. We had over 50 people participate from the greater Park City area in the systems group meetings. So we feel like we have been heard and we have been treated well in those meetings, but we are vigilant. In any collaboration, everybody's wondering who's going to get the short end of the stick. I did a forum down in Sandy and told them about Park City's concerns, and somebody came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, thank God, we thought Park City was trying to come to Sandy and take our money." And I heard a similar thing with Alta last night. Alta, apparently they were so specific, they said, "We'll take those people from Sandy, but we don't want those people from Park City." So I think everybody participating in this is worried that they're going to get the short end of the stick. And I think that's the nature of a collaboration. And we will continue to try to represent the Wasatch back to the best of our ability and to represent our needs. With that, I'll hand it over to Chris.
Yeah, Sarah, so we have taken every opportunity when there's been a vote or an action by the executive board. We had a Shredder retreat in Midway in November, and we've had lots of, it may not hit the headlines. In some ways, I'm glad that the connections on tonight's in the blueprint, because maybe you guys wouldn't have shown up. For better or worse, it is at least a lightning rod for involvement. And the real question to me is, it's like, Mark, you mentioned about the train that's been proposed connecting Una Basin with Green River, wherever, Price. They at least studied it. Somebody went out and paid a consultant. They determined it was going to cost $6 billion, whatever, $5 billion, and it's a no-go. And so the real kind of tightrope that we're walking here is, can we, with grave reservations, allow it to be studied without, it's kind of like Roger Armstrong on our council, he uses the analogy, can they plan the wedding and us not show up as the bride or the groom, at the end? And so we're very concerned about that, but at the same time, we don't want to miss potential opportunities that could be in it. So is it Clay? To Clay's point, that's one way of playing it. It's less nuanced, but it's kind of right in between the eyes, no, we don't need any more information. We know the answer, it's no. We're playing a little more nuanced game, trying to find some good in it. Find something that's a win-win. That may be impossible, and if it is, then we're going to be pulling out.
I'm going to have to close because we're just about to get kicked out. But I would like to add on to the commentary that, the Park City and Summit County are really in the driver's seat here. And when we say consensus-based process, what that means is that the executive board isn't going to decide what happens in this community. This community decides what happens in this community. And there are outcomes from Mountain Accord that it could not include the tunnel or could include the tunnel. So the outcomes are based on what this community centralizes around and what the community decisions are. So I'd like to end on that note, and we're all going to walk outside, so we'll be available for more questions. And thank you very much for being here tonight.